Thank you, folks, for listening by live stream. Thank you, folks, on Sunday night on 1620 AM and 92.3 FM. Thank you for listening right now. Mike Shoesmith, it's so good to have you on, my man. So we got something at the Natural History of Museum in the UK that is burning in your craw to discuss, and I think I know where you're going. This is some good stuff. It's good to have you, man.
Yeah. Hey, I love this stuff. Hey, you know that verse in the Bible that goes something like, whatever the devil intends for evil, God can turn it around for good?
Oh, yeah. We're watching a lot of that happen, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. Like your car crashes and you get thrown from your car in a violent way, but you land softly in front of an unclaimed gold mine. You know, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it?
Right? So anyway, here's the story. It's out of Breitbart. There's a lot of content here, but this is really, really good stuff. UK's Natural History Museum to review offensive Charles Darwin exhibits bowing to BLM pressure. So Breitbart goes on to say, in response to the iconoclastic Black Lives Matter movement, the Natural History Museum has launched a review into supposedly offensive and problematic collections, including exotic birds collected by English naturalist Charles Darwin. The review will audit rooms, statues, and items that the executive board deems offensive for possible renaming or removal to show how science, racism, and colonial power were inherently entwined. Yes, indeed.
Yes.
Why persons other than white haven't boycotted and picketed and burned this place to the ground yet, I have no idea. That's because people are ignorant to the facts about Charles Darwin. But they're not going to be any more, Carl. I don't know. You don't want to know. You don't want to know. People don't want to know this. They're going to know anyway. They're going to hear it from me. Documents revealed to the Telegraph from the review state that in light of Black Lives Matter and recent anti-racist demonstrations around the world, the Natural History Museum will review whether any statues or collections could potentially cause offense. So they're scrubbing and sterilizing everything over there, right? Because now they're concerned. Why? Because they know some things about Charles Darwin, and they don't want this stuff to get out.
Yes.
So they're kind of trying to get in front of the cart here a little bit here. Get in front of the pitchforks and the torches.
Hey, Mike, yes. Before you go any further, and I'm not going to give anything away, but Isn't this what you and I on PNN for... Let me see. We started together in 2008. It's for 12 years. We've been screaming that Darwinism is abjectly racist. It is racist. Right. It was used by people like Hitler and Stalin to murder and mutilate and destroy millions of people. The whole theory of evolution. It is so racist. We've been screaming this. And we were called idiots and science deniers, and now all of a sudden, the Darwinists are having to agree with us because of BLM Incorporated. Go ahead, Mike. Keep going.
They're desperately trying to get out ahead of this so that people will not dig further into the ideology that is Darwinian evolution. You know, why is God opposed to the theory of evolution? Well, primarily because it's a myth. It's a fairy tale, but other than that, it's white supremacist and racist at its very core.
Yes,
and you're going to learn before I get off the air today how deep this goes. Okay, the review will reportedly include specimens collected by Charles Darwin on the Gallups Islands, which were instrumental in helping the naturalist form his theory of evolution. A curator of the museum listed the pieces as an example of Britain's many colonialist scientific expeditions. The museum is home to a statue depicting the 19th century naturalist, which may also come under scrutiny, Carl, during the leftist assault on British history. The review team argued that exotic birds collected by Darwin and caption, they're saying caption Robert Fitzroy, it should be Captain Robert Fitzroy,
yes,
on the island served to enable greater British control throughout South America. A statue honoring Thomas Henry Huxley, who promoted Darwin's theory of evolution to such an extent that he is known as Darwin's bulldog, has been targeted for removal, Carl, as well, due to his controversial views on race. What controversial views on race? The guy was a flaming racist.
Yes.
That's why the director of the Natural History Museum, Michael Dixon, told staff, quote, "The Black Lives Matter movement is at the door with pitchforks." No, he didn't say that. He said, the Black Lives Matter movement has demonstrated that we need to do more and act faster So they're in full panic mode there, Carl. So as the first step, we have to commence an institution-wide review on naming and recognition. We want to learn and educate ourselves, recognizing that greater understanding and awareness on diversity and inclusion are essential, Dixon went on. A creator at the museum argued that we're wrapping this up here. A creator at the museum argued that collections need to be decolonized because museums were put in place to legitimize a racist ideology.
Yes,
there we go.
Yep.
And that covert racism, Carl, exists in the gaps between the displays. Besides, we're about to prove this here in a minute. But besides targeting Darwin, the review is also looking into pieces collected by Joseph Banks on his journeys with Captain James Cook for the British Empire, as well as flora specimens, yada, yada, yada. In August, the British Museum announced that it would be removing a bust of Sir Hans from its pedestal and placing it in a cabinet adorned with a plaque that describes his connections to the slave trade in Jamaica because he was a racist. The last words were added by yours truly. Let's get into the heart of this here, though. Why? Why all this concern, all this panic by the curators over there? Well, this is from Williams.edu. This is an educational site, and the title of this article is "The Dark Side of Darwinism." The Dark Side of Darwinism. Because, okay, so the article is very in-depth. Here we go. I will post this to the Freedom Friday Facebook page as soon as I'm done here.
Okay, good.
Although best known for On the Origin of Species, which I have read, by the way. In fact, the PNN Network, we used to do do a book burning every year. We would burn On the Origin of Species because of what we're about to tell you.
Yes.
Okay. Although best known for it got so bad, Carl, that we couldn't even. We had to go out of state to find a copy of On the Origin. We had burned all the copies at the bookstore.
I know. I remember when you used to make those videos. Boy, the Darwinists, their heads exploded. You were standing there, of course, kind of mocking the whole book burning thing. But you said, "Hey, if we're going to burn books, let's burn Origin of the Species."
It was a whole event. It was Burn the Origins Day, we called it, and we made it into an entire event here.
Yeah.
So Williams.edu, they go on to say that although he's best known for that piece of garbage work, Darwin does not address human evolution in that book until his 1871 book, The Descent of Man. Now, here's where the dark side of Darwin comes in, because in that book, Darwin applies his theories of natural selection to humans and introduces the idea of sexual selection. Here, his white supremacism is on full display. Over the course of the book, Darwin describes Australians, Mongolians, Africans, Indians, South Americans, Polynesians, and even Eskimos as savages. It becomes clear that he considers every population that is not white and European to be savage.
Yep.
The word savage is disdainful, and Darwin constantly elevates white Europeans above the savages. Darwin explains that the highest races and the lowest savages differ in moral disposition and in intellect, Carl. The idea that white people are more intelligent and moral persists throughout this book. At one point, Darwin says that savages have low morality, insufficient powers of reasoning, and weak power of self-command. Darwin's specific consideration of intellectual capacities is especially alarming. He begins with animals. No one supposes that one of the lower animals reflects whence he comes or whither he goes, what is death, what is life, and so forth. His remarks soon expand to humans. How little can the hard-worked wife of a degraded Australian savage who uses hardly any abstract words and cannot count above 4 exert her self-consciousness or reflect on the nature of her own existence? Darwin writes that Australians are incapable of complex thought. Australians, Carl, are incapable of complex thought.
I'm listening to you. Well, see, but you and I have been screaming this for decades, that that theory is trash and racist and godless, but now it's finally coming to the top. Keep going.
Right, and he also insinuates that they are akin to lower animals, Carl. His perspective on non-European races is incredibly prejudiced and absurd. Modern evolutionary scholars and teachers tend to ignore or omit that component of Darwin's theory, but it hasn't gone completely unnoticed. For example, Rutledge Dennis examined Darwin's role in scientific racism for the Journal of Negro Education and found that in Darwin's worldview, talent and virtue were features to be identified solely with Europeans.
Yeah.
White supremacy is clearly embedded in the descent of man, regardless of Darwin's brilliance or the accuracy of the rest of his theory, which is totally bogus because Darwin saw that. Darwin was the great extrapolator. He saw that finches become finches and animals become animals with bigger or smaller beaks. Therefore, fish turned into human beings over billions of years.
Yeah.
And he didn't even come close to understanding the complexity of the individual cell. So here we go. If we're going to focus Black Lives Matter on anything, let's tear this monument to the ground.
Thank you. Thank you. Tear that monument to the ground and several others, but particularly that one, because that one so-called theory, which has now, which has been taught now for many, many decades as settled scientific truth, has caused the death of millions of people all over the world. We'll be right back, folks. After this brief timeout, we're going to take a 2-minute timeout. Mike Shoesmith and I'll be right back.
Thank you for listening to Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups in the Oval Office of the Gulf Coast.
Welcome back to Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups. Sit down, buckle up, and hang on.
Yeah, all right, folks, we're headed right up to the top of the second hour. It won't be long. Do you recognize this voice? It's because it's the most recognized voice of live Gulf Coast Talk Radio. And you're in the Oval Office. Thank you so much for being a part of the show today. We're streaming live this Friday afternoon, carlgallups.com. You can go to the live stream there. The phone number is there. You can call in live. The live text line is there. You can do that. The Facebook link to the live interactive Facebook page with this show, it's all right there. Plus the podcast from last week, it's all right there. So anyway, it's all at carlgallups.com. But in the meantime, before we get to the top of the second hour, we've still got another whole segment. Mike Shoesmith, it's good to have you back with us.
Say, you don't suppose Margaret Sanger got her eugenicist and racist ideas from Darwinism, do you? I mean, not only does Darwin believe in white supremacy, Carl, he actually offered a biological explanation for it. Think about that. He is teaching that there is a biological explanation for why white Europeans are supreme over all other human examples of what he was witnessing out there, because he wrote that, namely, that white people are further evolved. He writes that the, quote, Western nations of Europe now so immeasurably surpass their former savage progenitors and stand at the summit of civilization. I mean, he imagines that Europeans are more advanced versions of the rest of the world, Carl. You don't suppose that Margaret Sanger got her ideas from that, do you?
Yeah, well, actually, she did. And you're asking it tongue-in-cheek and rhetorically because you know the answer. And thank you for the softball. Bam! I just hit it out of the stadium. No, she is. Not only did she get her ideas from Darwinism, but so did Adolf Hitler, so did Joseph Stalin, and on and on and on. Yes. They got their murderous, I mean, because of Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood, we now have 60 million little children in America alone, 60 million a year around the world that are destroyed. And that's on the light side when you get around the world. Some people expect or suspect that it's probably 100 million little children or more. The number one killer on the planet, the number one cause of death on the planet is abortion. And why do they suspect that it might be 100 million? Because fourth and third world nations don't report. And first and second world nations sometimes underreport. And with the reporting we have, we know that over 60 million a year in and year out, year in and year out. That's how many died in World War II. It's like there's a World War II fought every year. The carnage and bloodshed of World War II happens every single year because of Margaret Sanger. And so the Democrats used to go around awarding each other the Margaret Sanger Award. Mike, she was a eugenicist, a racist, and her whole purpose of putting together Planned Parenthood and a ubiquitous abortion availability was to destroy the black race in America. She said it. She wrote about it. She talked about it. You and I have been screaming it for years on the radio. And it's like nobody cared. Now, all of a sudden, the Museum of Natural History in Great Britain says, we got to distance ourselves from Darwin. The Democrats are saying, we've got to distance ourselves from Margaret Sanger. I mean, the duplicity and the hypocrisy just knows no boundaries, Mike. You speak. I'm sorry, I took too much time. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, not only do they have a problem with blacks, African Americans, whatever, they also have a big problem with the Australians now. Now that we're leaking this out here, because a lot of people don't know that Darwin was very much anti-Australian. In fact, he was so anti-Australian, Carl, that his theory claimed that Africans and Australians were more closely related to apes than Europeans. The spectrum of organisms is a hierarchy here, with white Europeans at the top and apes at the bottom. In Darwin's theory, Carl, colored people fall somewhere in between apes and white Europeans. Modern human is essentially restricted to only white Europeans, according to Darwin, with all other races viewed as somehow subhuman. This is the man upon which people are hanging their existential hat on. I mean, they're teaching this guy's theory in school, this racist, white supremacist piece of trash. They're teaching his theories as scientific fact in schools today. This is what they're teaching children today in schools. Is it any wonder, Carl, that now we have people treating each other like animals when all we've done for the last several decades is teach them that they're nothing but animals?
Yeah,
should we be surprised by any of this?
Yeah, for the last 100 years in America, we've raised up several complete generations of intellectual idiots when it comes to real science, observable, demonstrated, repeatable, falsifiable, scientific method. We've raised up generations and generations of idiots. And what do? Now they're running Planned Parenthood. Now they're running governments. And now they're running school systems and even into our scientific community. And it's welfare science. I don't know if you coined that phrase, but you coined that phrase right here on Freedom Friday. It's welfare science. If it was, and by the way, Mike, I'm just going to ask this rhetorical question. You and I have asked it so many times. I wish somebody would call in and give us the answer or text us, but they can't, so I'll just throw it out there. Please name one earth-changing, earth-shattering invention that was brought about for the betterment of humanity that the theory of evolution brought to the world. Nothing. Sometimes they'll talk about germ theory. Well, now we know that viruses can mutate, and because evolution. No. That is macro evolution. That's evolution within a species. Viruses are always viruses. Viruses don't turn into anything else. But they can't come up with anything. We've known about germ theory. No. We didn't need evolution to discover that viruses mutate.
No.
But can you think of what else are they saying? What are they saying, Mike? There's nothing that it has brought to the human race except for 60 million murders a year or more through Planned Parenthood and the genocide of Germany and et cetera. I mean, what do you say to that, Mike?
I think that every year they release a list of the most useless doctorates you can get in university, and ones that cost the most but are the least beneficial for humanity. Yeah. Ranking in the top 5 on every list is evolutionary biology.
Yes,
because
it means nothing.
They rely 100.
It means nothing. You've got a degree in nothing. Nothing.
It's right up. It's right up there with learning finger painting, Carl. That's how useless evolutionary biology is. And yet, if they take the grant money away from them and they say, okay, do something useful with what we taught you.
Yes.
We're just going to take all the grant money away.
Yeah, produce something.
They would all be on food stamps and would be begging for a job at McDonald's.
Yeah.
Because it is Richard Lenski has dedicated his entire life to proving evolution through observing generations of bacteria, E. coli bacteria, and now I think he's up over 100,000 generations, the equivalent of multiplied millions upon millions of years of human evolution. And the best advancement that he's been able to observe as he's been watching these generations of E. coli bacteria is that they have been able to digest citrus, Carl. That's the bacteria, generation after generation, have never produced anything more than other bacteria.
That's my point.
Exactly. So David Rees answered this question recently. How did you get all the animals on the ark? And he says, look, all we needed was 2 dogs. We just needed 2 of this, 2 of that, 2 of this. Every dog you see, from the cute little toy poodle to the big German shepherds, they all came from one mating pair of dogs We know that biblically, and we also now know that scientifically.
Genetically.
It was two wolves.
Yeah, two wolves.
Right,
Just like we know that all humanity started from a male and female, and most evolution say somewhere in Africa, but now we're finding some of the oldest remains. Guess what? It's in my book, Gods of Ground Zero. Some of the oldest remains we have found, scientists, even evolutionists, are right in the area of Jerusalem, Israel.
Right. And you do a fantastic job in Magic Man in the Sky, explaining a lot of this also. You go into greater detail, and one of my favorite books I've ever read.
Yeah, well, thank you.
And I encourage people to get Magic Man in the Sky, because you go into great detail about why we should jettison the idea that microbes turned into microbiologists and fish turned into men, and we are just animals made out of meat. Why you should jettison that comfortably and securely. Read Magic Man in the Sky. I don't know. Is that book completely sold out? Can they still get that copy?
We still have it. They can get it from me for sure. Yeah, carlgallups.com and click on it. No, we can get you copies and signed copies, etc. But the other reason people are jettisoning evolution is because now we know it's racist. It's what you and I have been saying forever. It is racist. So is Planned Parenthood. So is Margaret Sanger. I mean, listen, thank you, my man. We're out of time. Mike, say whatever you want to say. You got 15 seconds. ppsimmons@live.com. We can help you further with the truth. ppsimmons.com. I love you guys. We'll talk to you next week. Okay, you can email him there. ppsimmons@live.com. SIMMONS. ppsimmons. Stands for Pastor Paul Simmons. There's a story behind that. We'll tell you about that some other time, but live. You can get him at ppsimmons@live.com. Mike Shoesmith. In the meantime, we're going up top of the second hour. Brandon Big B will be here in a minute. Don't go anywhere. Give us 5-6 minutes. We'll be right back.